Arizona Territory, 1883. Pat O'Connell had everything a man could build with sweat and grit: land, cattle, and a name that carried weight from Tucson to Prescott. But after one bad marriage left him hollow, he set out to find the truth, to see if there was still a woman left in the West who could love a man for his heart, not his silver. So he gave up his fortune, took the name James, and vanished into the desert. Watch till the end to find out, did Pat find the woman he'd been searching for, or something he never expected? Tell us where you're watching from, partner, and welcome to the Sleep West family. Now saddle up, and let's ride straight into the story.
Pat O'Connell was barely 30 years old in the dry, unforgiving heart of the Arizona Territory. Yet the dust of 1,000 trail drives had already settled on his soul. His ranch, the sprawling O'Connell spread, was a monument to 12 years of near-impossible labor. He wasn't born into fortune. His father had left him a handful of scrawny cattle and a drafty pine cabin the year Pat turned 18. While other men chased silver or gold, Pat chased grass and water, driving his small herd until his back screamed and his hands bled, learning to read the market as keenly as a Comanche read the desert tracks. By 1883, Pat's name was whispered in saloons from Phoenix to Tucson. He didn't just have cattle, he had acres of deeded land, a magnificent ranch house carved from local stone, and a reputation for being the hardest working man on his own payroll. He had achieved the American dream. Yet the dream felt hollow. The raw, desperate hunger that had driven him was gone, replaced by a quiet, gnawing loneliness. He was 30, rich, and ready for a partner. That's when Letitia arrived. She drifted into Prescott on the arm of a politician's wife, a stunning creature with eyes the color of a stormy sky and a silk dress that looked utterly alien in the sun-baked territory. Letitia saw Pat's wealth instantly. She saw the heavy silver buckles, the gleam of his imported boots, and the deference shown to him by the bank manager. She mistook the easy confidence of a self-made man for the laziness of an inherited fortune, and she was drawn to the comfort his money promised like a moth to a flame. Pat, starved for female companionship and charmed by her graceful airs, fell fast. He saw the beauty but overlooked the hollowness. "I need a woman who can stand on her own 2 feet. Letitia," he told her one evening, his voice rough with honesty. "A partner who knows the value of the ground beneath her. I earned all this with my own hands, and I want a wife who understands the grit it took." Letitia simply laughed, a light, musical sound that dismissed his worries. "Of course, darling. But that's what staff are for, isn't it? You hire them to keep the grit off your fine rugs." Against his better judgment, the low, insistent warning that hummed in the back of his mind, they married. The conflict was immediate, stark and brutal. Letitia treated the magnificent stone house like a stage, and the staff like invisible props. Pat, despite his wealth, still woke before dawn, poured his own coffee, checked the tack in the barn, and walked the fence line just to feel the sun on his face and remember where he came from. He tried to share his world. "Letitia, come with me this morning. I'll show you how the books are balanced, or maybe you could oversee the branding tally." "A good rancher's wife knows the numbers better than any clerk," she replied, draped across a velvet chaise lounge. "My hands are meant for embroidery, Pat, not ink and ledgers. That is the foreman's job. Why hire a dog and bark yourself?" The final confrontation occurred 6 months later. Pat stood before her, the exhaustion of fighting a losing battle heavy in his eyes. "I want a partner, Letitia," he pleaded, his voice low. "I don't want to be waited on. I want someone who takes pride in the life we build. I want you to manage this house, manage the kitchen, or at least understand the effort it takes." Her stormy eyes narrowed, losing all trace of charm. "I told you, I come from a good family. I have no skill for managing dirt and servants. If you can't adjust your peasant habits to match your wealth, then I will leave. Give me my share of the property, and I will be gone by morning." The word share hit him not like a slap, but like a bullet to the chest. It was the confirmation of every fear, every warning, every doubt. She hadn't seen him. She had only seen the fence that kept the poverty out. He simply nodded. Very well. The next day she left with a heavy, well-calculated settlement, returning to the polished life she preferred. Pat watched her carriage disappear down the long dirt road, feeling a desolation that no amount of money could fix. He was not grieving a wife. He was grieving an ideal. He vowed he would never expose his heart or his fortune to such mercenary judgment again. The desert test for 3 months. Pat refused every proposal from hopeful families in Phoenix. He needed a new kind of certainty. He needed a test so rigorous, so absolute, that no gold digger could pass it. He needed to find a woman who loved the work of living more than the reward of wealth. He sold off a few head of cattle and secretly packed a wagon with only the essentials, a few tools, a worn bedroll, and a few $100s in cash. Then he vanished. His foreman was told Pat was taking a long necessary trip to California. In reality, Pat rode 200 miles east, deep into the harshest, loneliest stretch of the Arizona desert. He used a false name, James, and purchased a derelict, one-room cabin and an abandoned corral near a barely used water hole. He bought a small, scruffy herd of 20-odd cattle, the kind of stock that took real effort to maintain. He dressed in worn denim and dusty leather, let his beard grow thick, and allowed his cabin to remain simple and stark. Pat O'Connell, the Arizona millionaire, had become James, the struggling, solitary ranch hand. 6 months into his self-imposed poverty, the desert sent him his answer. Emma, she appeared one dusty afternoon, walking with a steady, determined pace. She was a young widow, named Emma, wearing a dress patched but clean, carrying a basket on one arm, and leading a small, quiet girl with the other. The girl, about 6, held a battered book. Emma stopped 10 feet from Pat, her posture straight, her gaze direct. "Sir," she said, her voice clear, despite the dust. "I live about a mile south. I heard you settled in and might be needing a hand. My husband passed 6 months ago from the fever. I have a child to feed, and I am not afraid of work. I can cook a solid meal, and I can keep accounts. If you have a place for me, I will earn my keep." Pat looked at her critically. He saw the thinness beneath the dress, the fear in her eyes, but also the deep, immovable dignity. This was a woman fighting for survival, not luxury. "I have little to offer, ma'am," Pat said, leaning against the corral fence. "The work is long, the pay is small, and there are no amenities. You'd be looking after stock and managing the books for a very small operation, on top of cooking." "I'm good at numbers, sir, and my daughter and I are used to making do," she replied simply. He agreed. From that day on, Emma arrived daily. She didn't complain about the small, hot cabin or the meager supplies. She cooked simple, savory meals, thick stews and sourdough bread that tasted of competence and care. While Pat worked the cattle, she would work the books. Pat watched. He watched her mend a tear in his canvas jacket, not just stitching it, but making the patch strong and neat. He watched her patiently teach her daughter, Alara, to read from the worn book while the stew simmered. He'd sneak a glance at her ledger. Her handwriting was elegant, and her calculations were flawless. She managed to squeeze an extra $1 of profit out of every 10 they earned. He also found himself talking to Alara. The little girl was bright and unfailingly polite. "What is your favorite number, Alara?" Pat asked one day while Emma was out checking the water trough. 3, sir," she replied immediately. "And why is that?" "Because it is the number of sides and the strongest shape, a triangle. My mama says that a sturdy life, like a good fence, needs 3 strong rails: faith, diligence, and learning." Pat blinked, struck by the gravity and intelligence of the answer. Emma was not only self-dependent, she was raising a child to be independent as well. The depth of the woman's character revealed in the daughter impressed him more than any mansion. In 6 months, the small herd had doubled its market value, not just from breeding, but from Emma's careful management and Pat's deep knowledge of the land. The reckoning one chilly evening, Emma stood before Pat, holding a folded letter with a look of conflict on her face. "Mr. James," she began, twisting the paper, "I received a letter today. My uncle, who runs a general store in Phoenix, has offered me a position, a clerk's wage, with room and board. It's a good offer, a steady income, and it means a secure future for Alara. Her eyes were full of apology. I am so grateful for the chance you gave me here. This small ranch is thriving thanks to your knowledge, but I must take this step for my daughter. Can you spare me? Pat looked at her, and the facade of James almost cracked. Here was the ultimate proof. She wasn't holding on to a comfortable job. She was willing to abandon a place of security for the promise of a better future for her child. She was making her own way, with grit and clear-headed calculation. He took a deep breath. "Emma," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Before you leave, I have one question, a hard one." She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir?" Pat walked toward her slowly, deliberately, and reached for her hand. He didn't drop the disguise yet, but the mask of the dusty rancher fell thin on his face. "Will you marry me, Emma?" The shock that washed over her face was complete. The letter dropped from her fingers. "Sir, I don't understand. I am a poor widow. I have nothing but debt and a child. I do not deserve your generosity." Pat shook his head firmly. "You deserve more than this dust, in this lonely cabin, Emma. I have watched you for 6 months. I have seen a woman who manages numbers, with a sharper eye than any accountant I've ever hired. I've seen you turn poor ingredients into nourishing meals. Most importantly, I've watched you raise your little girl with more dignity, respect, and discipline than many a wealthy mother I know." He stepped closer, his heart finally free of the old wound. "You took a failing situation, your life after loss, and you began to rebuild it, brick by hard-won brick. That is the kind of partner a man needs. I don't want to marry a woman who knows how to spend money. I want to marry a woman who knows how to make a life." He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt expression that eased the harsh lines around his eyes. "And I will not just marry you. I will adopt Alara. She is a part of the strong foundation you've built, and she will be my daughter." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, the first time Pat had seen her emotion break through her iron reserve. "Oh, Pat, sir, yes, I will marry you." "No more, sir, Emma. Just Pat," he corrected gently. The reveal 3 weeks later, they stood before a quiet justice of the peace and were married. Pat hired a single fine carriage and driver to take Emma and Alara from the desert cabin back toward Prescott. As they rode, Emma kept looking around, expecting Pat to take her to some small, neat farmhouse. Instead, the carriage turned onto a long, sweeping drive. In the distance, rising like an elegant fortress from the red earth, was the magnificent O'Connell spread ranch house, surrounded by sprawling green pastures filled with thousands of head of healthy cattle. Emma gasped, clutching Alara close. "Pat, what is this place? A relative of yours?" Pat reached across, taking her hand. He didn't speak until the carriage stopped at the wide, shaded porch. The foreman, an old loyal friend, rushed out, grinning from ear to ear.
"Welcome home, Pat, and welcome, ma'am," the foreman boomed.
Emma turned to Pat, bewildered, her eyes searching his face. "Pat, what is the meaning of this? Who are you?" He helped her and Alara out of the carriage. He stood on the porch of the house he had built with his own 2 hands, the sun glinting on the silver buckle he had deliberately hidden for months. "Emma, come inside. I owe you the whole complicated story," he said, leading her through the carved front door and into the grand parlor. He sat her down, Alara nestled at her side, and told her everything: the struggle, the immense wealth, the painful mistake of Letitia, the blow of the divorce, and the terrible lonely plan he had hatched to find a partner. He explained how he had shed his name, his possessions, and his comfort to become James, the struggling desert rancher. "I had to know, Emma. I had to know if the woman I married valued the life itself or just the ease of it. I had to know if she had the grit to build from nothing." Emma was silent for a long moment, processing the shock of realizing her simple husband was one of the wealthiest men in the territory. Then she smiled. It was a slow, beautiful smile of understanding. "You didn't test me, Pat," she said, her voice steady. "You just watched me live. The life I lived in the desert was the same life I would have lived anywhere, because Alara and I do not know any other way than hard work. She rose and looked out the window at the endless prosperous fields. This house, these cattle, they are beautiful, Pat, but they are just the reward for the work you taught me to love. I will manage this home, I will run these books, and I will raise our daughter. You are not just a millionaire rancher, Pat O'Connell. You are a man who understands that the true measure of wealth is not what you own but how you live. Pat O'Connell, the self-made man, finally felt complete. He had everything he had worked for, and now he had the partner he truly deserved. The loneliness of the great Arizona ranch was replaced by the quiet, steady warmth of a powerful, genuine partnership built not on gold but on the enduring strength of shared grit.